Welcome everyone to this week's lesson where we're going to be reviewing the Feast of Shavuot in its rabbinic and Jewish context. The written Torah describes Shavuot, which literally means weeks, as an agricultural feast. So upon listing the holy days, the Torah commands to count 50 days after Passover, which leads up to Shavuot, the Feast of Weeks. And this you can see it in Leviticus 23. The Torah mentions Shavuot a few times, describing it mainly as an agricultural feast, whereas Passover's description is heavily detailed. Shavuot is left seeming as a minor holiday in terms of its biblical context, meaning there's not a lot to work off of. It seems pretty obscure, even. However, the sages draw upon the oral Torah, this is the rabbinic side, now seen in the Mishnah and the Talmud, to enhance this feast based on a specific background and identification. So, in rabbinic tradition, the Feast of Shavuot is commemorated as Matan Torah, which is Hebrew for the giving of the Torah. This is the day God gave the Torah to Moses on Mount Sinai. This event symbolizes the covenantal relationship between God and the Jewish people and represents the culmination of the Exodus journey, establishing the Jewish people as God's chosen people through the giving of the Torah. So, while Passover represents the physical redemption of the nation, Shavuot is seen as a spiritual redemption. Every year, Shavuot is a renewal or a reacceptance of the Torah. And as mentioned, while the source of this identification is not explicitly in the written Torah, the oral tradition provides methods in which the sages arrive to these fixed dates. Well, wouldn't such a magnificent and foundational event be mentioned explicitly in the text? Why isn't it called Festival of the Giving of the Torah? Well, sages like Abarbanel and Baal HaAkedah suggest that the reason this identification of such an important event is not found in the written Torah is in order to not misrepresent the nature of the Torah. You see, the Jew is to take the Torah upon himself every day of his life. This is basically standard rabbinic Judaism. So if Shavuot had been simply known as Torah Day, imagine how many people would take that to mean that, well, this is the one day to approach the Torah. So this identification also allows a further understanding regarding the nature of the Omer count. So the Midrash teaches that the children of Israel were told in advance that the Torah was to be given in 49 days. So they all began to keep track of the time, counting up in anticipation for this grand event. The Midrash teaches that it was precisely because of this genuine excitement that the counting was instituted by Hashem as a mitzvah. The counting begins after Passover because it is a time of redemption from the physical slavery of Egypt. The culmination of the counting, as we said, Shavuot, Matan Torah, the giving of the Torah, demonstrating the spiritual redemption achieved by Torah study and fulfillment of the mitzvah, the commandment, surpassing importance of the physical liberation. Further insight is seen upon reading the Torah commandment to count 7 perfect weeks. This is interpreted as referring to this special 7 week period being a time of reflection to perfect oneself and rid any obstacle that draws one away from Hashem. If you want to learn more about the Omer count, we did have a lesson on that just last month. The reading for the first day of Shavuot is Exodus 19 to 20. So the story of Matan Torah is a true climax to the Exodus story, meaning the giving of the Torah is treated as the very reason why God took Israel out of Egypt. Well, why didn't Hashem just give them the Torah when they came out of Egypt, right? Why exactly did they have to wait a whole 7 weeks? Well, the rabbis explained that given their suffering in Egypt, Hashem did not consider Israel fit to receive the Torah so soon. So they stayed in the desert for a few months, with Hashem making himself known to the people by manifesting his great kindness. He opened up the Sea of Reeds for them. He saved them from Amalek. He provided the manna. He provided the well. And only then did he ask them if they wished to accept the Torah. Furthermore, the Midrash also teaches that when the people of Israel left Egypt, there was so much strife, there was so much contention, so much argument, so much discord among themselves. So the rabbis ask, could the Holy Torah be given to a people who were not at peace with each other? The Midrash explains, only upon arriving at the desert of Sinai did all quarrels end, and then the people were united. Only then, now, Hashem said, the Torah of peace may now be given to them since they have learned to live in harmony with each other. So finally, after 26 generations since Adam's creation, Hashem was bestowing his precious Torah to the universe, and, as the Midrash relates, he found a people willing to accept it. The rabbis identify the exact day the Torah was given as a Shabbat morning, meaning a Saturday morning, on the 6th of Sivan in the year 2448. This is being the year 2448 years from creation. So the Midrash says that the children of Israel actually overslept on this day. So they were awoken by thunder and lightning on Mount Sinai. Moses called out to them, saying, "The Khatan, the groom, is waiting for the bride to come to the chuppah, the wedding canopy." So Moses brought the people to Mount Sinai like the usher leading the bride to the wedding. And what was the scenery like? So in traditional understanding, those who were physically present were not the only ones receiving the Torah, but they were joined by all the millions of unborn souls of their descendants and by the souls of all the strangers or future converts who would accept the Torah in future generations. The Midrash says that Hashem descended upon Mount Sinai in a burst of fire, a fire that rose up to the very heavens, and the mountains smoked like a furnace. Hashem was surrounded by a host of 22,000 angels. The earth quaked, and there was again thunder and lightning. The sound of the shofar became continually louder, growing in intensity until it reached the greatest volume which the people could possibly bear. The children of Israel not only heard Hashem's voice, but the Midrash explains that they actually saw the sound waves as they emerged from Hashem's mouth. So although the people had requested to see Hashem's glory and to hear his voice, their souls departed from their bodies when they actually experienced the revelation. At the sheer force of Hashem's voice, this is midrashic language, cedar trees broke, mountains quaked, hinds gave birth from shock, and the entire forests were stripped. The nations who witnessed this commotion inquired of Bilam, this is the prophet to the Gentiles. They asked him, "Is Hashem about to bring another flood?" And Bilam assured the nations, no, no, no. The world is astir because Hashem is giving the Torah to his people. So the Midrash also has this very important detail that when God began to share the Ten Commandments, it says he was doing it himself. He was pronouncing them himself so that the entire people heard the voice of God. But the Midrash teaches that upon reciting the first command, the Anochi Hashem Elohecha, I am the Lord your God, it says that the entire Israelite people, every single person passed out, meaning they died. And so the 22,000 angels came down to resurrect them all. Okay, and then God pronounced the second command. This is the Lo Yiyeh Lecha Elohim Acherim Al Panai. Thou shalt not have other gods before me. And guess what? The entire people died again. So the angels came to resurrect them. And it was only after this second command that they recognized how the level of prophecy exceeded their power of perception. So the people were, beyond frightened. They begged Moses to transmit the rest of the commandments rather than to hear Hashem's voice. Again, not because they just didn't want to hear Hashem's voice, but because they all felt unworthy. When God gave his Torah, Rabbi Akiva says that the Jewish people could actually see the thunder and hear the lightning. So you may think, oh, well, this is obviously wrong since it should be reversed, right? Thunder is heard and lightning is seen. Well, here's a lesson on seeing beyond the physical. For example, at the grocery store, a regular customer sees a red apple and says, its color is so red, it has a perfect shape and it tastes delicious. He sees the apple as a nice and tasty fruit. Well, how exactly can one view past the physical? Well, one views past the physical by making a blessing on the apple and recognizing it's more than just some fruit. It's really a blessing of Hashem, and one must show the gratitude to He who makes the fruit grow. Furthermore, to add upon the midrash of this grand day, Shemot Rabbah explains how God's voice split into 70 languages so that all the nations would understand, meaning there was no excuse. Nobody could say, oh, well, I just didn't understand the Torah at all, so this event means nothing to me. No, everybody heard it in their own language. This number is normally associated with the entire world. The number 70 being representative of the nations, seen in connection to the 70 sons of Noah, making up the entire world population. So this way, the Midrash explains how God was telling the entire world that it has no excuse, especially not even to follow just the seven Noahide laws, as I'm sure you've heard of in rabbinic circles, as it was given to everyone in their own language, in their own tongue, capable of being received and understood. Again, this is also to add upon later on in Deuteronomy when we see Moses say, remember, the Torah is not in heaven, it is not beyond the sea, it is there to be on your mouth and in your heart for you to truly embody the Torah. So, in a previous lesson on Parsha Yitro, you can find I posted a lesson on the Ten Commandments and their rabbinic understanding. So, I'll try linking that video if you're interested in that lengthy discussion. But for the remainder of this lesson, I wanted to briefly review what some Shavuot traditions look like today. The first tradition we'll mention is how dairy foods are eaten, and I actually got to experience this in person last Shavuot. I went to a synagogue here in the valley. Rabbi Goodman was very welcoming, and I got to eat a few slices of cheesecake with the community there. So this is following Rashi's interpretation of Song of Songs. It says, "The sweetness of Torah drips from your lips like honey and milk. It lies under your tongue." So, Divrei Yedidiah or Yedidiah, teaches that these two phrases allude to the revealed Torah, meaning that, let me see this, sorry. The sweetness of Torah drips from your lips. So this refers to the revealed Torah, which is accessible and it has to be taught to everyone, meaning these teachings drip from your lips, okay? So it must be taught to everyone. Whereas, like honey and milk, it lies under your tongue. This refers to the hidden Torah, or the secrets of the Torah, which is only limited to scholars of the highest caliber. They must remain under your tongue. Furthermore, the Hebrew word for milk, that is, let me write it down there, chalav, has a gematria of 8 plus 30 plus 2. Chalav has a gematria of 40, corresponding to the 40 days and nights Moses spent on Mount Sinai before bringing the Torah down. I'd also like to briefly present this table once again to show you that there are 5 Jewish holidays that are accompanied with a specific reading. And on Shavuot, as you can see here, the scroll of Ruth is read. So there are a number of reasons given as to why the scroll of Ruth is read on Shavuot. And so let's just review a few of those reasons. The first reason is simply that the Book of Ruth and the events of the Book of Ruth occur at harvest time, which is the same time as Shavuot. And then there's a second reason that identifies, um, that relates it to Ruth's conversion, symbolic to entering the covenant at Mount Sinai. Again, remember, Matan Torah, the giving of the Torah, uh, when that is identified as Shavuot, it's seen as the day the entire Jewish people enter the covenant with God. So Ruth's conversion to Judaism or entering the covenant is described in the first chapter. And again, this is very based on the rabbinic understanding of the book, which requires its own lesson, of course. But just seeing Ruth's declaration of saying, "Do not plead with me to abandon you, to turn back from following you. From where you go, I will go, and from where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May Adonai deal with me, and worse, if anything, but death comes between me and you." That is seen as her acceptance of joining the Jewish people, entering into that covenant. And then the last reason is that Shavuot is seen as the day King David was traditionally born and died on Shavuot. So Shavuot is also seen as David's yahrzeit. Sorry, that's the day. That's the name of, you light a candle in memorial of the person on the day they died. That is Jewish tradition. So the story of Ruth is seen as, first off, the reason Ruth was even written or included in the Bible, according to the rabbis, or one of the major interpretations or introduction given to the book, is precisely because um, it was to give the background on King David's family history, in which this was royal and chosen descent, which ultimately leads to Messiah in both, in obviously Jewish thought and also later in Christianity. And basically, it deals with the problem or the sort of, I guess we'll call it an issue, recognizing that that lineage includes Moabites. again. So that the Book of Ruth deserves its own lesson. Truly, very great book. I remember reading it. I think it was just I think a couple years ago that I first read it, and just the whole question of Judah and Tamar, Genesis 38, the question of Ruth being a Moabitess. But I just to not leave you so like confused, the problem is resolved in saying that there was a sort of loophole that the Torah forbids Moabites to enter into the people, but it doesn't say Moabitesses, meaning female Moabites. So that's how it's kind of excused. Furthermore, the gematria of Ruth. Let's see the name Ruth in Hebrew, Ruth. That's 200 plus 400 plus 6. That's 606. And then we're just going to add those 7 laws of Noah. And then we get to 613 commandments. So this is the reason. These are the reasons given as to why Ruth is read on Shavuot. Another Shavuot tradition is for the synagogue and houses to be decorated in greenery. These are some examples from around the world. The Torah was given in a desolate desert. Yet, the Midrash says that in anticipation of the giving of the Torah, Mount Sinai suddenly blossomed with flowers. Likewise, recalling the mystical interpretation of Matan Torah, the giving of the Torah being a wedding ceremony between God and his people Israel, the flowers are like decorations for the wedding canopy. It's appropriately beautifying the scene. So much like the Passover scenery, where it's the beginning of the life-giving season, Shavuot and the giving of the Torah appropriately fit in this theme of the season of life-giving with the Torah. Now, the last tradition I'd like to mention in conclusion of this lesson will be, I just want to summarize this excerpt from Chabad's article where they explain what is Tikkun Leil Shavuot. This is literally rectification for Shavuot night. Rectifying the night of Shavuot. What does this refer to? Well, first, it introduces this concept by saying, after a feast or a holiday, it's common for the guests to finish eating, to finish up the conversations, the host cleans up, and slowly, one by one, the entire family everybody goes to their own rooms, right? And everybody, slowly, they fall asleep. But on Shavuot, there's an extraordinary tradition where no one goes to sleep that night. Everybody stays up all night to learn the Torah. So, what is so special about this night where people reject a good night's sleep and opt for studying and learning, right? Can't that wait for the morning? Well, as we mentioned earlier, the night before the Torah was given, the people of Israel decided to turn in early to get a good night's rest, right? It's a big day tomorrow, after all. And this seemingly innocent decision, however, led to embarrassing consequences. The next morning, when it came time for the Torah to be given, the place was empty. Everyone had slept in. Moses had to wake them up, and the Midrash says that this caused God later to lament, and this is midrashically taken from Isaiah 50, verse 2, where it says, "Why have I come, and no one is here to receive me?" So because of this midrash, Jews worldwide have the custom of staying up later in order to rectify their forefathers' mistake, showing their continuing enthusiasm for the receiving of the Torah. Now, according to the Arizal, the Lion of Blessed Memory, those who refrain from even a second of sleep and spend the entire night learning will be protected from any harm that year. So, what exactly should be studied on this night? They're actually quite liberal about it. Anything Torah related is the obvious goal. You can do it alone, or you can do it with a partner. And there's even classes given this late into the night on this festival. Now, I haven't seen if there's any near me, but I know it's definitely worldwide. Synagogues are open. Let's go study the entire night, right? And Chabad.org, actually, I do recommend it. They have this English translation of an entire booklet. I actually have it over there. I had to print it out, 150 pages, because it includes every single portion. Sorry, it includes a portion from every single Torah portion of the yearly cycle, and it also includes portions from every single book of the Hebrew Bible. So let's say realistically, you're not going to read the entire Hebrew Bible in one night, right? But what that does, it at least gives the first chapter of every single book, and like that, you're basically reading. You're going through the Hebrew Bible, and furthermore, it even includes every portions from every part of the Mishnah, and even some essential Kabbalistic mentions near the end. And finally, it has the entire list of the 613 commandments. So, I recently heard a rabbi say that. in some synagogues that he's been to, let's say the northern side of Israel, the study goes for like 4 to 6 hours, right? Everybody calls it a night. But he says that the Sephardics in the south, they go for 12 hours. So, meaning if we start our study at 7 p.m., we would be ending it at 7 a.m. And then right after that, remember, it's time to do the morning prayer. It's time to read the book of Ruth, time to read the Torah portion, time for the, lengthy prayer. So, perhaps in other cultures, the feast or a typical feast would continue, right, with more food, more drinks, more games. But I'm sure you can see that Shavuot is truly set apart in its dedication to God and the Holy Torah. So I hope this teaching has been a blessing for you all, and we'll see you in the next lesson. Shalom, shalom, Shavuot Tov. Have a great week, everyone.